We're taking a look at these markets, which are off slightly here, down 68, but again, off the lows of the session. We had started in the green. That was reversed. Stocks extending those losses we saw on Friday. Amid all this concern about Turkey's economic turmoil, the Turkish lira actually dropping to new lows today and causing emerging markets to really be rattled. But should investors here in the U.S. really be all that worried? Joining me here on set, Fairfax Global Markets CEO Paul Dietrich, along with Bullseye Brief founder and publisher Adam Johnson. Good to have you both here. Paul, starting with you, because I know that, Adam, you're probably still pretty bullish on
Oh,
this,
yeah, I'm consistent.
I mean, is there a fear of contagion here? How big a deal is this Turkey stuff?
I've been talking with analysts all morning in Europe, and I think the consensus is that this is a Turkish-specific situation. I know that emerging markets debt and currencies are going down because investors hate that instability. But the Turkish economy is a mess. I mean, they have massive dollar-denominated debt for the country, for banks, for corporations, plus President Trump's tariffs, plus economic mismanagement, plus President Erdogan is moving toward an authoritarian dictatorship. He's taken away independence of the central bank. These are all the things. The economic mismanagement of Turkey is really quite unique.
All right, but, you know, we know Turkey's a mess economically speaking. I guess the fear, at least on Friday, was, Adam, that, well, if Turkey's a mess and all those European banks are holding Turkish debt, they're going to be out of luck. And then, you know, hey, we have a lot of European bank debt, so are we going to be affected by any of that?
The answer is no. And fortunately, we've actually seen this movie before, and it's called Grease. It was actually on Broadway as well, right? I mean, we saw a couple of years ago a very similar sort of spiraling downwards, and it got backstopped, first by the IMF, then by the EU. Now, what's slightly different about this version, the one called Turkey, is that, in fact, it's a NATO ally. And I would actually argue that President Trump is using Turkey as a lever to try to get attention from both the Canadians and from China. In other words, look at this, Canada. If I can do this to a NATO member, imagine how I can turn the screws with you, because it's already going great with Mexico. And by the way, China, if I can do that with Turkey and Canada, just wait till I unleash on you. So I think there's actually another subtext going on here, Trish.
Interesting. Do you think Canada and Turkey, forgive me, Canada and China, are watching the Turkey situation carefully? Are they paying attention to this, Paul? Do they realize what they're messing with?
Without a doubt. But, you know, one of the things that's happened, it's kind of an unintended benefit for China, is that the Chinese currency is going down versus the dollar, which means that everything you buy at Walmart, even with the increased tariffs, it's not going to be that much.
So then China doesn't get as hurt as we'd like, but also the US consumer doesn't get as hurt as well. What if there was just sort of a public campaign, and we're going to get to this a little bit later in terms of what's been happening with Harley Davidson and the president really calling Harley Davidson out. But Adam, what about people just saying, look, you know, I'm going to look at the back of that label. I'm going to figure out where this was made. If it was made in China, I don't want it.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that might, I mean, that you could see a national rallying cry from Americans saying, I want to buy U.S.-made products because I don't like what China's doing to us and to our workers? Made
in America. I mean, that's something that, you know, that campaign started during Ronald Reagan, and you've seen it come out time and time again. Yeah, absolutely. Made in America. There's pride. I will say, though, with regards to Harley Davidson, the whole reason Harley said it was going to take some of its production over to Europe was to get around tariffs. Well, actually, they may not need to, because we're now actually working with Europe to try to figure out some sort of tariff-free framework for trade. That's huge, Trish.
No, it's a big deal.
Huge.
Do you think, Paul, that there's a real shot here at reorganizing the world in terms of these trade agreements? I mean, he doesn't have a lot of time, right? I mean, any president who's there, he'd be lucky to get 8 years. Ed Rollins thinks he will. But if he gets through 4 years, how long does it take to really start to reshape these things? I
think it's going to be very soon. We're almost, probably within weeks, we're going to have a deal with Mexico. So that's good. I mean,
and that would help them, too, and Republicans in general in midterms?
Exactly. Oh, sure. It says progress. And we're working together. It's strong.
And one of the things is, I mean, President Trump is a bull in a china shop. He is using a caveman's club to bludgeon our trade partners. And we're just sick and tired of going to the World Trade Organization and nothing getting done, nothing. We win in the World Trade Organization, but then they appeal, and it just takes...
Okay,
in other words, can I just say this?
Yes.
He's our wartime president, Trish. He's doing what Obama didn't have the guts to do.
I don't ask me why, but my husband and I were watching a clip from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Remember that movie? Because, like, there's this void. My parents never let me see anything that was PG-13 when I was a little kid. So, like, I didn't see all these movies that everybody else did during that time. So we're watching it, and good old Ben Stein is on there.
Right.
And remember these Bueller.
Right.
Well, Ben Stein was giving a lesson in economics. And it was Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Yeah. And he was talking about the Depression, and he was explaining in this lesson to these high school kids that didn't want to be there exactly what tariffs would do to the world economy, and ensure they did in the 1930s. How do we make sure that we're not going to be, you know, another lesson from Ben Stein?
There's an important distinction. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs, people were protectionist in those days and were intending to have protectionism in the United States. I do not believe that President Trump is a protectionist. I believe, in the end, he wants to lower all tariffs. And sometimes you just have to threaten people.
Yes.
Because you have to get them to come around to your side.
Exactly. The end game is not to erect tariffs. The end game is to get rid of them, and he's using them in order to get rid of them. He's fighting fire with fire.
That is exactly right.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, guys. Good to see you.